Hello, Polyhack. This is my first time speaking that is not a company internal talk, so that's really exciting. And I just want to say thanks to everyone that came out to come watch the talks tonight, as well as my group of friends that came to support me, and also my dad, who's here from Northwestern Ontario. Hi. For anyone who was at last month's meetup, when Ben spoke about why devs should care about DevOps, I am the DevOps friend that has suffered. Just gonna get that reference out there. Oh no, I forgot to start my timer. Oops. And it's also not starting the next slide. That's okay. So a little bit about me. I've been doing DevOps now for 4 years, and in 2 weeks I'm making the really big jump to being a software dev. So I'm gonna have to do all these things I've told devs that they need to do for 4 years, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. I've worked in fintech, media, and e-health, and I'm going to be a DevOps Days 2019 speaker this year. I was going to add a fun fact, but apparently I just wrote fun fact, so that's my fun fact. So failure is inevitable. It's a pretty grim way to start a talk, but it's going to happen, and it's probably going to happen when you don't want it to happen, like 3 a.m. I know it's more of an ops-targeted kind of thing to talk about, but it's going to be something that happens. I guess really quick poll, who's kind of experienced downtime or seen ops running around firefighting for downtime? Yeah, I like hands. Those are good. A really big thing to kind of keep in mind is that our products are only as strong as the weakest link in the product. And that weakest link can have a really high cost. So we're looking at a couple numbers here. They're all pretty big. I don't actually know how to start this. There we go. So that $500,000 was, and also a 0.8% drop in stocks, was Facebook when they had 30 minutes of downtime in 2014, which is a while ago. So we've now got $1,400,000, which was 5 minutes of downtime from Amazon in 2017. And we've got $150 million, which was the cost of one typo. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but it was an AWS did a config management kind of update, and it brought everything down for 4 hours in March 2017. It was pretty stressful. And so what does that, a lot of companies have SLAs where they're kind of talking about how much uptime they have to guarantee to other companies or users, clients, people. 99.5% uptime looks like 3 hours and, why did I put 3.6 hours a month. 99.9% uptime is 43 minutes and 12 seconds per month. And 80% of companies now using cloud providers are actually asking for 99.99% uptime, which is 4 minutes and 19 seconds exactly a month. It's pretty scary kind of boundaries to work with. So let's talk about self-healing systems. This is actually really the content of my talk, but chaos engineering sounds way cooler and is the way you test them. So what are they? This has generally been my self-healing systems flag. Basically, a concept of how to explain it is that when you get a cut and you kind of have to heal, your cells just kind of know what to do. You don't look at the injury and be like, hey, I'm bleeding. Could you just not and heal yourself, or I'm going to hit this button and you're just going to get better? It doesn't really work that way. It doesn't really make us invincible, being able to self-heal, but it does make us very fault tolerant, and we're a very good example of what that looks like. When you take that as a kind of recap, we've got cells, organs, and bodies, which are different pieces of us as a person and how we heal. You can kind of extrapolate that to functions, services, and applications, where the function is probably the smallest piece of your code, similar to cells. Your services are kind of like your organ. They each do a thing. They have one job, and they kind of do that job really well, hopefully. And you've got your application or your product, which is the aggregation of all of these pieces of you. And chaos engineering is how to test that. So if self-healing systems is hey, how do I build a fault-tolerant system? How do I heal and recover from the problems that I'm experiencing? Chaos engineering is how do I break it right now? How do I build trust that the system I have created actually self-heals and reacts to problems the right way, and not in production at 3 in the morning? Got my great example here. When I was thinking of safety, I was like, what makes me think something's safe? Hard hats. Hard hats are safety. And then he kind of looked like a weird college kid with a sideways hard hat, so I added this tested label to be like, testing makes it safe. Yeah. This is an example that somebody from Google worked on for one of their conferences to kind of explain how self-healing systems work, how things like Kubernetes work. It's called Whack-A-Pod, which is very, very similar to Whack-A-Mole, as you can see. The concept is that you would have this Kubernetes cluster running in the background, which has 12 API pods, I think a web server, and there's one more that's the admin pod, I believe, and you kind of whack them out. So we played a game at the last time I did a talk internally where you would actually do this and hit all the moles, and the way to actually win is you need to get the entire cluster to come down. For the whole cluster to come down, you need to get each service down, all 3 of them, and to get each service down, you need to get all 4 moles in that service. I strongly recommend this if you're trying to learn Kubernetes, see how it works, trying to get a feeling for how the services come back up. This is a really great place to start. You can kind of actually play through it, hit these things, knock down. It's really hard. I only got them all down once, true story. It's kind of like you're injecting failures right now to see how your application will actually survive these problems. If you could kind of take one concept out of this talk, the one thing I want you to walk away from this is knowing that your products are only as reliable as the weakest link in it. If you look at products and building them, you need to think of them as more than just an aggregate or a sum of all of their features. They also need to include all of the things that they run on, your test framework, your infrastructure, anything else that makes it live. Because if you have really, really clean, really, really fast code and you're like, look at these numbers, this is great. But it only works on your machine or maybe on dev or one place, or it doesn't work reliably, it doesn't really help. It's not fast and it's probably not going to stay up. So what can you do to kind of get started towards building these things? You design with failure, not a failure, with failure in mind. So something in this mind is error handling. If you can't reach your database and your whole app crashes because of that, you're going to have downtime. Second one is nurturing your code. This is probably the weirdest statement in this entire talk, but don't be a bird and just shove it out the nest and hope it's going to fly. You want to nurture your code. You want to test it. You want to make sure it's doing what you think it's doing. And the way to do that is setting up logging, metrics, and monitoring. A lot of us kind of wait until, well, we need to get this feature out for the client or we need to do that other thing. If you do that, you won't be able to know that things are actually doing what you're expecting them to do. I totally talked on both those points at the same time. This one was going to be on the logging and metrics and monitoring. So this is a very ops perspective, but you want to have cattle, not pets, and be working with immutable images. So what this means is that if I have my code here or there, or really anywhere, it should run the way I'm expecting it to, down to the infrastructure. I want to be able to have dev environments that match prod environments so that you don't have downtime because it worked on dev and stage, which maybe had some weird things going on, and then you deployed to prod and everything broke. And finally, if I've sold you on chaos engineering and it as a cool concept, there's an open source project, which apparently I need to click one more time. There we go. Called Chaos Toolkit that you can contribute to. It's written in Python. To address, I guess, question that Zach had earlier as to why not Simian Army, which is Amazon's pretty famous tool for this. They actually deprecated the tool, and it now only works if you're bought into Spinnaker, which is their CI tool. You can't really just integrate it with everything anymore, which is sad.
It's Netflix.
Oh no. Now it's opening Whack-A-Pod on my screen. So I have some references and background material because I'm planning on sharing the slides after. And thanks. Question time?
Do you run something like the Chaos Monkey that Netflix has internally?
I wish. The closest we've gotten is that Ben actually did you did a deploy with, I think, KubeMonkey?
Yeah.
It was like a PR on a side change.
Oh, it runs.
It does run. Okay.
It
It does break things. It's kind of like a happy ideal state that we've been working really, really hard to get to. There's a lot of DevOps concepts I kind of glossed over in this talk, given that I haven't done a 10-minute talk and I didn't actually know what will fit into 10 minutes. But we're most of the way there to being able to run it. It's something, the project I'm actually referencing is, well, it is my goal to do this quarter, but given the talks coming up, I had to pick one or the other. So that's coming up next month.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say would be a good entry point for developers who are looking to learn about DevOps so that they don't get like completely overwhelmed? Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. That's a great question. I think it really depends on what your focus is, because DevOps means so many things, especially based on who you're talking to. It could be infrastructure as code. It could be writing pipelines. It could be Docker. There's like 12 pillars of DevOps. I think, for me at least, and a couple of people I know, a really good place to start was find what hurts the most. If you're wasting a lot of time because you're manually deploying things, or environments are inconsistent, or maybe you have a monolithic application where something goes down and just everything is down, whatever hurts the most that you're interested in is probably where I'd advise starting. It's just, there's so many. Yeah. Although, wait, one more. Actually, one more answer. I'll link this in the Polyhack Slack after, but somebody did this great how-to graph about, like, I think it was like web dev ops and DevOps, and it's like a flow chart of different high-level concepts and tools tied to that.
Cool.
I'll link that after in Polyhack. Yeah.
So I kind of came at DevOps from the programming side. I'm originally a programmer. I came into DevOps kind of just out of necessity. I'm only kind of loosely aware of it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, like, how is the inverse? Like, did you come into DevOps and then, like, did you need, like, sort of a basic functional understanding of programming, or, like, how in depth do you need to go?
I started in computer science and dropped out, as I got a co-op, and then I went into DevOps. And so I started with coding, and then in professional world, I started very heavily ops background. The very first thing I actually ever did was configuration management with SaltStack, which is written in Python. Kind of coming from the other way, like there's pros and cons. Like, as a developer, you probably have a much better background at things like building up modules, which becomes a really required skill for things like Terraform. And that's something that's kind of hurt our team a little bit, because we are a very ops-heavy background team. I don't know.
Is it more like the big picture, and, like, you kind of like, okay, this black box of modules or whatever, like, you kind of look at it like that, as opposed to knowing all the details about how it's implemented, kind of thing?
It really depends on the person. I do a high-level picture. I like to see how everything fits together and how it works, and figure out where it hurts in between, and then kind of start from there. My coworker really likes to do the low-level version and kind of be like, I want to do this one thing really cool, and I want to do this one thing really well.
Right.
That's kind of, it depends. Having an ops background first, I think we've agreed, is really good to have, because if you just kind of jump into it, you'll kind of do things like I did in my first job, where you'll just casually remove sudo from everything, and you need sudo to re-add sudo, and just, you got to start over. So, bad times, but yeah.
So I had a question about kind of the use cases for
Yeah, right, that was the other one.
and kind of how to fit it into like an existing workflow. I mean, so you mentioned Spinnaker. So with
Yeah.
CI/CD, I mean, how would you just randomly drop machines during the course of like a testing run? Like,
So-
how would that fit?
This is a really opinionated answer, so I'm going to start with that. My ideal flow would be having dynamic environments. So it'd be something like, if you could do a PR, and then it'll spin up your environment so you as a dev can go test your dev feature, and then it tears it down, because money. And then, like, when you get ready for QAs, they'll do the testing. And then we're at kind of this point where it's been validated and you're ready to go to production, but you're not at production yet. I think my happy path would be to have an environment there that runs the chaos test suite. What Netflix does is they casually will be like, oh yeah, on this day with some random time that we're not going to disclose, we're going to run our chaos suite, and you shouldn't notice it. And it's in production. So that's kind of their path, but it takes a lot of time to get there. Still do things like Chaos Gorilla that will just casually bring out an entire region.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it's like kind of, so when they go to run kind of like a chaos test suite, like is it like a deterministic kind of set of things that fail, or do they kind of just run things within certain parameters, or?
Sure, they have a bunch of different tools. So they'll have one that kind of casually, it'll just bring down pods and services. There's another one that will bring down regions, as well as like actual just availability zones. They have one that injects latency and sees how that kind of handles. And there's one or two more. I don't have them memorized anymore, but
Cool.
yeah.
Cool.
So I guess the use case would be like when you're like, I am feeling confident that this feature is ready to go to a customer,
Right.
but it's not at the customer. We're going to do it in a prod-like environment. And then the idea would be that eventually you get to the point where you can run it into production.
Yeah.
Your ops team will love you.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.